With over 3 years of Claymores, that's a ton of Claymores actually, you might be asking yourself the question, which Claymore should I be using on my Navia build? But don't worry, I'm here to help you solve that problem. I'm Josh, welcome back, and as we go through these Claymores, make sure you remember one very important thing. If a lot of the stats on the weapons are attack percent or boost your attack in some way, these weapons are going to be a little bit worse in comparison to other weapons that boost your damage percent bonus, your crit rate, and your crit damage bonus if you're using everyone's favorite character to love or hate in the game, Bennett, because Bennett's already going to give you a ton of attack. So if the Claymore just gives you a bunch of attack, it's not as efficient as another Claymore that could give you other important stats like crit chance, damage percent bonus, or even crit damage. So let's start off with her best Claymore, her own signature weapon. And she's going to have her own signature weapon that's going to have crit rate as the main stat, which could be awesome. It's going to give you a ability that gives you increased attack 20% and refinement rank 1, and then it's going to give you a stacking damage bonus every time you pick up crystallization elemental shards from these reactions. Each of these is going to give you 18% increased damage. You can have a total of 36% increased damage at refinement rank 1. Once you use your elemental skill though, you're going to lose this 36% bonus damage until you pick up 2 more shards. And if you want the short of it, this is going to be her best weapon regardless. So if that's what you came here for, to see if her own signature weapon is her best weapon, well guess what? Yes, it is. All right, moving on. For 4-star options, let's start with the Battle Pass weapons. The new one, the Talking Stick, does give you a significant amount of bonus attack as well as bonus damage with crit rate on it. However, keep in mind that a lot of these bonus effects are tied to whether or not you're actually affected by certain elements. So for example, having someone like Bennett in your party is going to give you a decent way for you to have the ability to have yourself affected by pyro element. And while this is a decent Battle Pass weapon option for a 4-star, it pales in comparison to the best 4-star option as a Battle Pass weapon in the version of the Serpent Spine. In fact, the Refinement 5 version of Serpent Spine is just slightly worse than the Refinement 1 version of her own signature weapon. So if you pick between 2 different weapons that you're going to pick from your Battle Pass for Navia, use the old one, get Serpent Spine, don't go for the Talking Stick. Other fantastic 4-star options include the Black Cliff, which you can buy out of the Star Glitter Exchange Shop. The Black Cliff gives you crit damage as its main stat and gives you stacking attack percent bonuses upon defeating enemies. Even something like the crafted prototype Archaic, while not the best, is a still pretty great option for Navia. It's only going to be around 18% worse than her own Refinement 1 signature weapon. Next up, another 4-star option in the form of the Ultimate Overlord. That's going to be a little bit better with the more mellow swines that you help out. It's going to give energy recharge, which is going to help you obtain that 60 energy cost for her elemental burst, and it will give you a little bit of attack as well. The Skyward Pride is a weapon you might have laying around, and it's something that you probably have questions about. Is it going to be decent for Navia? Well, it does have a nice base attack, and it does have energy recharge on it. Although it's not an entirely high amount of energy recharge, thankfully Navia doesn't need that much energy recharge towards her elemental burst in most team compositions. The downside of the Skyward Pride though is that the blade effect on it just really doesn't scale that well. It doesn't do geo damage, it's physical. Yeah, it's nice free damage to do some AoE against some hilly trails, but outside of that, it doesn't really do that much. If you're using a team with Bennett, it's going to be around 18% worse than her own signature weapon at refinement rank 1. If you're not using a Bennett team, then it's going to be around 22-ish% worse or so. Speaking of energy recharge weapons though, the Sacrificial Greatsword is actually pretty decent for Navia on Bennett teams. This is because, yeah, it's going to have that energy recharge on it, but it's going to give you an extra use of your elemental skill, which, while it doesn't boost your damage with numbers like crit chance, crit damage, or attack percent, it's basically adding a small extra multiplier to one of your elemental skills every once in a while. Yeah, you're not going to have the max amount of ammo stacks on your Navia for that bonus elemental skill, although in some circumstances you could. It is going to be a pretty decent option for you if you have another copy laying around. And Bennett seems to be about 15% worse than her own refinement rank 1 signature weapon. However, without Bennett, this weapon does fall off and is a whopping 29% worse than her own signature weapon. Another crafted option I know I'm going to get asked about is going to be the White Blind. So we went and calced it with maximum amount of stacks, no stacks whatsoever. It is going to be one of her worst weapons, around 23% worse than her own signature weapon. It does give defense. We love it on Noelle. It's okay, I guess, whatever. But this isn't Noelle. This is Navia. There's no defense scaling on it. It's just going to be a bunch of extra attack from those stacks. So if you're looking for a use for a white blind, don't put it on Navia, put it on somebody else. Although if you have nothing at all that you can use on your Navia other than the white blind, feel free to throw it on. The Wolf's Gravestone is a fantastic option. It's been in Genshin since day one. The pluses of this weapon is that it gives you a giant amount of attack percent and even more attack percent on enemies who meet that ability HP threshold. The other plus for this as well is that it's not just giving Navia attack percent either. When you proc the weapon's ability, you're going to give attack percent to the entire party, giving your Navia the ability to bump up some of the off-field damage dealers that you may be using, like Ling, Fischl, or even Xingqiu. The downside to this weapon, well, guess what? If you're using Bennett, it is a weapon that just gives a ton of attack percent. So in a Bennett team, it isn't as good as in non-Bennett teams. In fact, in non-Bennett teams, it's going to be just under 5% worse than her own signature weapon. However, in Bennett teams, because you have so much bonus attack, all of this attack percent from this weapon is a little bit wasted, and it's going to be around 11% worse than her own signature weapon. And speaking of attack percent weapons, why not talk about the Unforged? The Unforged is actually a pretty fantastic weapon. It's going to give you shield strength increase, which might help some shielders that you could be using with Navia in your team. Someone like Layla, maybe even Zhongli, or even those crystallized shield reactions could help you live a little bit of extra HP and make yourself just a tiny bit tankier with those crystallization copium shields. All right, but the other big bonus of this as well is that not only are you focused on crystallization reactions with Navia, but this weapon also wants you to have some sort of shield to get a larger attack percent bonus, which is something that you can do with crystallized reactions. So this is going to be a way for you to always have maximum benefit of the Unforged. The downside of this weapon is just like it was for the Wolf's Gravestone. It's just a bunch of attack percent bonus. So if you're using Bennett in your Navia team, it's still going to be a solid option for you. It's only going to be around 8% worse than an R1 version of her own signature weapon. However, if you're using Bennett in the team with something like the Unforged, you're going to see diminishing returns from all this stacking attack bonuses, and it's going to be a little bit worse in that regard. And speaking of weapons that give you a ton of attack, we have the 1000 Blazing Suns, one of our newest available weapons. This is Mavuika's signature weapon, and it does give a whopping 741 base attack at level 90, and it does give you a little bit of crit rate here, sitting at 11%. The refinement ability here allows you to increase your crit damage by 20%, as well as your attack by 28% for 6 seconds when you use an elemental skill or an elemental burst. The downside to the 1000 Blazing Suns is that you don't get the full effect of the refinement ability here, as well, Navia doesn't ever go into a Night Soul Blessing state. You aren't going to be able to get that final effect of the refinement ability that states that Scorching Brilliance effects are increased by 75% during that Night Soul Blessing state. However, it still is a fantastic weapon if you have it laying around to just go ahead and throw on Navia. Aquilmaru at R5 is going to be a pretty decent option for you in a Bennett team with all those attack buffs. It's only going to be around 20% worse than her own R1 signature weapon. However, in a non-Bennett team, the Aquilmaru is only going to be around 14% worse in these setups. Another solid 4-star option for you is going to be the R5 title Shadow. If you're looking for extra weapons to craft up, this is something that you can get a lot of use out of. It's only going to be around 19% worse than her own signature weapon in teams with Bennett, but teams without Bennett, it gets even better, and it's only going to be around 7 to 8% worse in non-Bennett teams. One weapon that performs about the same regardless of your ability to have Bennett in your party or not in your party is actually the Bacon, aka the Beacon of the Reed Sea. Dea's signature weapon is only going to be around 10 to 11% worse than her own. This weapon, which happens to be Dea's signature weapon, so good luck gaining access to it, is only going to be around 10 to 11% worse in either party composition. Doesn't matter if you do or do not have Bennett. Going to help you with that crit rate as its main stat, and then it's going to give you some extra bonus attack as well. So what are you going to be using? Drop it down below so we can all see.